Okay, welcome to our fourth episode of Global Chat with Roberto. Our guest today is Justin, a young and dynamic law student currently residing in Ukraine. For full disclosure, Justin has served as a translator and interpreter for us over a period of several months, for which I am eternally grateful. Justin, welcome to Global Chat.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roberto. It's great pleasure to be here. Yeah, we've been in touch for quite a long time, and yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I hope to provide some really fruitful information and have fruitful discussion today.
Well, thank you. I've met with you many times and hardly know anything about you. So it's a catch-up time. And speaking of catching up, I understand today is your Independence Day, Ukraine's 33rd Independence Day. So congratulations. Slava Ukraini.
Heroям Slava. Yes, indeed. It's the 33rd time we celebrated, although during the wartime, it's you can hardly tell that we are celebrating it. We rather uh, acknowledge the fact that we've been able to sustain ourselves as an independent state for such a long period, and we're considered very young nation, while at the same time being one of the oldest nations as such, the Ukrainian nation, the Russo-Ukrainian nation. Um, Historically speaking. So this day is very important for us, not only like on the international arena or something like that, but also to embrace and acknowledge, yeah, the fact that we are one whole nation, and that we should be able to be as one until the moment that we feel that uh, we'll be able to win this war, yeah, as a first task, and then
Absolutely.
bridge all the gaps within the nation itself in order to be able to provide for long many years afterwards.
I take it you're not setting off fireworks.
No, absolutely not. We actually there were messages a couple of days before from the embassy of the United States that to the all the diplomatic officials in the embassy of United States in Ukraine in Kiev that there are going to be some violent attacks during these days.
Oh, oh,
Hopefully, nothing will happen onward, but so far there have been no such attacks, at least in the big cities like in Kharkiv, in Kiev, in Lviv. So far, there have been, of course, air raid alerts, but nothing too egregious. At least, as I said, in the like major cities. Of course, there were many incidents in the Kharkiv and Donetsk regions.
which is the border area,
Yeah, the border
right?
areas,
The contested
and
area.
yeah. So in general, yeah, we do not fire fireworks
Yeah.
since
No, I can.
February 24th, 2022 at all. It's a criminal offense to do so because obviously it's wartime, and it can be regarded as a act of fire aggression.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's too dangerous, obviously. Um, so you said you're in Kiev right now,
yep, I'm currently in Kiev.
residing in Kiev.
Yeah,
Okay.
moved here roughly a month ago, so it's kind of new experience for me, but it's not the first time I'm here.
I understand it's a really beautiful city and I'm coming there. So I hope I'll get to see you when I'm there in November.
Absolutely. Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
gorgeous city. I've seen it in many videos and pictures. But all right, well, here's our first question. I would like to know, what was it like to grow up in Ukraine, your early life? You're pretty young now, right? How old are you?
Yeah, I'm currently 22.
20. Oh,
Uh,
I thought you were 19. Okay. What was it like growing up in Ukraine?
Well, as you mentioned it, I was 19 when the full-scale invasion started. But speaking of my earlier life, I was born in Kharkiv. It's became a worldwide known city for its resilience during the full-scale invasion. But before the war, even before the actual war started in 2014, it was a major city. It was mainly industrial built city and with a huge residential area. So I was attending school there. I went to my first university and got my LLB, bachelor degree in law, in at the Khorasan Kharkiv National University. Um, and that's where I also had my first essence and feeling uh, of a passion toward basketball and then law. And
Basketball. Oh, I
yeah,
had no idea.
yeah, it's a very unknown fact about me within my new surroundings, because previously I actually played professionally in back in Kharkiv. I started in late high school, and I played within the first league of the championship of Ukraine of basketball among men, up until I think my second year in at the university, because after that moment I had my first serious job. I got my first serious job, and then I also wanted to focus more on studies, and I also started my like scientific endeavors in various areas of law, including constitutional, rule of law, municipal law, etc. So
It's very
those
cool.
are years coming up to the full scale invasion. I was kind of trying to head toward something specific to find my niche in this life, but then the war kind of warped it, and I'm in a completely different place right now than I imagined only 3 years ago. So that is kind of the overview that I can tell you briefly about what I was before the war and currently.
How tall are you?
Not tall enough for basketball
Taller than
purposes.
me. I'm
Five
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 seven,
ten
5'10".
5'10",
Okay.
yeah, 180 centimeters, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not tall, but tall enough
It's tall enough in Ukraine, maybe.
to compete. Yeah, certainly.
That's cool. I had no idea. So you're surprising us already. I want to ask you another question. Ben said that you are biracial. Is that the correct term? And that is it your mother that comes from an African country and your
Oh,
father?
it's vice versa.
It's vice versa. Okay,
So
tell us.
I'm not sure about the term biracial. I never actually thought about it.
It's probably an old-fashioned term.
We have a different term used here in Ukraine. I'm not sure how it's used in other countries. It's called uh, mulat. I'm not sure how it's translated, but it's basically the a European race mixed with an African race. So that's general term that we use to identify a person who is looking like roughly like me. And in terms of my experience, so to begin with, my father is from Nigeria.
From Nigeria. Okay.
Yeah, he came to first Ukraine, then studied for a while in Russia, even when it was popular back in the early 2000s, and then came to Kharkiv. And my mother is from Zaporizhia region, Chernigivka village. To provide some context, it's roughly I don't know, 1500, no, 150, sorry, kilometers away from Enerhodar, which you probably heard of as the city which was built around the biggest nuclear power
Yes,
plant
yes. I
in
was going
Europe,
to just ask you that.
Energo Atom. That is the name of the nuclear power station, which is currently occupied along with the village Chernivka that I've just mentioned. Unfortunately, my grandma is still out there.
Oh my
That's a
God.
whole different story. But yeah, I at least have the connection to stay tuned what is happening out there with her. And so far it's been not nice from the perspective
Oh
of
my
how
God. Is there
they
any
treat
way to
her.
get her out of there, or it's
Not
impossible?
anymore.
Not
During the
anymore.
first year or half a year, it was possible due to the conductance of green corridors, for example, by
Uh-huh.
the international organizations of different types, but not anymore because every vehicle, every person who crosses the border, well, first of all, the front line is located there, so you cannot simply cross
Right.
this border between the occupied area and the area controlled by Ukraine, but also all the um, previously prepared corridors through which you could pass, for example, humanitarian assistance, etc., were closed, as I mentioned, roughly 1 year after the start of the full invasion, because as Russians claim, they provide enough humanitarian aid, food, etc., to those occupied areas, and there is no need to get any from from the Ukrainian side. Yeah, so I delved into that topic, but beginning coming back to to your initial question um, about uh, my race and how I grew up here. Um, it's kind of boring from my side because I almost never encountered any issues which would rise up due to my race. Of course, there were many instances that I was joked about in school, for example, or within my network and peer network during my early school days, etc. But then more toward high school, in the university, it was almost non-existent. So I was treated the same way as all the other all my other peers, and the only way it again it could be traced, this different treatment, is through jokes. So
So
there
are they kind of microaggressions, the way they call them here?
some of them could be,
Uh-huh.
but I treat them uh, just as any joke, as any bad joke
Right.
you could hear. So you just ignore it, and then the person just loses interest in continuing. And then there are good jokes which are used by have been used by my, for example, good friends, the best friends in in certain instances, just as uh, um, as a feature of closeness of our nations, I would say. So even the our cultures, I would say, because I grew up. Um, it's also, I think, an unknown fact, but Kharkiv in certain areas before the war, even before 2014, contained a lot of American style cultures and all the urbanism that comes from there. The basketball thing also, a lot of features I had involved in
Oh, interesting.
during those times. And so all the joking around that I was talking about is all part of that American culture brought in here
For better
with
and for worse.
um, I think it's for better because I
Okay.
had a certain sense of stability, I would say, and safety within those groups that I hang around, within those who were interested in basketball, because otherwise basketball is not really a thing in Ukraine,
Uh,
and only a relatively small amount of people are even interested in watching it, let alone playing it especially playing on professional level. So it provided a certain boost, I would say, at the beginning of times. Um, yeah, so that's basically my story about how I grew up. Almost never affected me, my race, but yeah, that's
So it seemed like there were a lot of African students in Ukraine that were leaving the country, that were visibly leaving the country at the beginning of the war. Did that, I mean, but were there ethnically mixed people that you grew up with as well?
yeah, sure.
I mean, were you the only one, or was it pretty common and not any big deal?
It was relatively common. So, for
Okay.
example, in the school
Okay.
that I was in, there were roughly two or three other people who had the same mix. Their fathers were from some African country, and then mothers were Ukrainians.
Mhm.
And that was the case in many schools in my area where I lived. So it was not completely uncommon, but it was uncommon enough to be distinguished from. So you were immediately catching attention from other people, but as I mentioned, it was not always in the bad ways. So it provided an opportunity to show what you can. For example, if we're talking about basketball, because everybody was interested in how genetics affect your abilities, and most of the cases it worked
And
like this.
you had to go through that all just
Yeah,
to
it
be
was
you,
just
just to be
pressure.
an individual, just to be the best that you could be.
Yeah.
Um, I want to ask you how you experienced the latest Russian invasion and genocide.
Well, first of all, as a lawyer, I must say that the word genocide is a very loud word, I would say, because it's probably the hardest among the grave violations of Geneva and Hague treaties
Mhm.
that we can that we can currently discuss. I think because, well, not delving into much legal detail, but genocide is all about intention. So it doesn't matter how much you kill, how much you destroy, how many people you persecute or forcibly transfer illegally to certain country. It's about the way that the prosecutor um, um,
Build a
can
case.
provide evidence for the intentionality to kill, to destroy in whole or in part, which is an integrable part of genocide crime. How much he can prove, and based on that proof, the court, well, in our case, the International Criminal Court or in International Court of Justice of the UN, will be able to prove that genocide indeed took place. So it's a very hard process uh, um, to actually to be able to prove its existence. But yeah, probably we'll delve into that topic more later. But speaking about my experience of the invasion, which has already been proven, and yeah, both at the ICJ and by the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC, also affirmed that there was indeed illegal act of aggression
Yes.
by the Russian state, so it's invasion legally. Um, I experienced it in many in almost as many as possible bad ways you could possibly imagine. So apart from being physically damaged, uh, I was able to see a lot of things that uh, I don't think any person should be able to see during his lifetime. Um, so all began with the 5 a.m., roughly 5 a.m. on February 24th, 2022, when I heard the air defense systems, which I later learned were actually air defense systems, because when you first encounter war, you do not distinguish between an air defense system or whether it's a rocket going straight into your house,
Right.
roughly speaking. But later then I learned that it was indeed air defense systems, and they were loud as hell. So obviously everybody woke up in a moment. And the first piece of news that I saw on Telegram, which we use all around Ukraine, um, was the news that Putin officially declared special military operation, as he called it, which is completely irrational and um, unsubstantiated, because it's obviously an act of war.
Right.
But in any case, it started like that. As we did not have a vehicle, we had two options: either to stay there and to see what happens. Maybe, as many claimed during those days, it's gonna be finished in a matter of weeks. Or the second option is to go straight to the train station and try our best, living towards, for example, Kiev, because Kiev at the time of the very first day of the invasion was pretty safe. Or further to Lviv, or wherever we could find out
So
other side.
Justin, sorry to interrupt. This was you and your parents in Kharkiv.
It was me, my mother, my sister, and a cat.
Okay.
My
No, I'm glad
father,
you included the cat. Yeah.
yeah, my father was in Estonia at the time due to his work commitments, and
Okay.
then later he actually stayed there and then joined my family when they all went abroad. But at the time, it was four of us, roughly, with the cat included. Um, yeah, so just to be brief, on I think it was March 7th, we actually decided to leave Kharkiv, because it was completely horrible to stay there, both because of the bombings and also because of lack of any kind of network, um, and simply means to sustain ourselves, because there were troubles with providing food, all the other staples, etc. And then, so on that date, early March, we departed to Lviv, even though it took us probably 36 hours, I think, straight without sleep, because it took roughly 24 hours to get on any train. And then and I also had this topic brought up at the CNN level, as I was a correspondent at the uh, youth network slash journal slash online media platform called Jurist, uh, which I'm grateful for being able to provide the platform to show all the things that I was able to show at the time. So after this evacuation, I also
Um,
had yeah, online interviews on air, both on air and recorded from Kiev, from Kharkiv regions,
so
from
you were recording things as they were happening
yeah,
with your phone?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Those things that I could record, because
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
the at the time especially, it was not allowed to film anything related to military or even critical infrastructure
Mhm.
points that would indicate, for example, that they're Russians or they're Ukrainians. It doesn't matter. It was all kind of matter of military intelligence. Um,
So you would focus on personal stories,
Yeah, personal
perspectives.
stories and the also, well, roughly political and military situations, because I've kind of monitored all of that. And as a future lawyer, or maybe even current lawyer, I should have been able to properly communicate those things to the outer world, because obviously all the Ukrainians knew what was going on, although it was not always the case. But the foreigners were, and as we call them, partners right now, um, were and still are very critical to providing us with all kind of crucial assistance, and also simply the people that we communicate, and the international community had to know had to have to know the real situation and what was going on, that it was not some minor um, state dispute
Right.
between the DNR, LNR, so-called republicas, but and Ukraine, but an entire invasion of a country to another country, which concluded in the international conflict.
It sounds like the trains were packed and it was looking like some kind of movie out of World War II. Is that how you felt?
Yeah, yeah, that's why it took 24 hours. We couldn't catch any train because the priority was people with children, the military, the elders, and people with disabilities.
Okay.
All the other were kind of were kind of left out of the picture, and so we had to find creative ways to find places where to stay. So we actually were traveling for, I think it was 16 hours on train without any stops. And we were traveling not inside the car, but um, in the space where there's entrance and the area uh, dividing the carts. That's the place that we traveled for 16 hours. It was cold because it was obviously early March. It was very dry, uh, and it was really hard. I had to recover for, I don't know, 3 to 4 days when we actually came to leave just after this experience. But
Yeah.
uh, what many people don't understand, it's the psychological heft that such things leave, and not the physical ones. So physically you can recover from a lot of things, but psychologically it takes a lot of time to even understand why such things could happen in the first place, and then how to be able to deal with them. Um, and that's been the story of, I think, every Ukrainian since the full-scale invasion, is how to deal with such a big catastrophe and being able to continue with our regular lives. Uh, yeah, that's basically the story.
How was your mom and sister and the cat?
Well, currently fortunately, they have been reunited. I think it's been a year that they are in the United States. Thanks to the United States for Ukraine program,
Okay.
they were able to find a host and then get up on their feet. And right now they're uh, on their own, renting apartments.
Okay.
Uh, so they're doing well, but again, it's very hard to integrate into society, to find a new job, and also being able to understand that, for example, me uh, is and my grandma, who is again in the occupied area right now, being able to live in the war-torn country and not being able to leave. That's I think the hardest part for them, and we talk regularly uh, and try to stay connected. Uh, but once again, it's all about being able to persevere and understand that there are certain things in life that you cannot control, and it's probably one of them.
Did you choose not to go with them, or were you not able to?
I was not able to. In fact, I had 15 attempts to cross the border in the summer of 2022.
I'm sorry, you had 15 attempts.
Yeah, to cross the border through almost all the crossing border points there are. And well, the the main purposes of leaving the country is not to leave and leave behind the war-torn country. No, not at all. I was aiming to, and I had several uh, competitions that I won, which were rewarded with a semester full of studying at a private university in Italy called Bocconi University. Then I also was selected for international forum of the European Youth Parliament, which took place in Latvia. Then there was a European forum at Albach, Austria, and many other such opportunities, which I previously attended, especially in 2021. But at that time, nobody cared which purposes you had for leaving the country.
Right.
All you had to do was to uh, kind of deal with the inadequacies that our border crossing officers and their um, higher rank officials told them to do, and which categories of people to let pass, categories of males over 18 and under 60
Mhm.
to be ordered to pass, and those who were not. And at a certain point, students who were admitted to foreign universities were not allowed to leave as well. And that was the situation that I was encountered with. Uh, and afterwards, I simply embraced it. I didn't want to utilize any illegal ways
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
many other Ukrainian males, for example, successfully or unsuccessfully, as we can see from the news, were able to utilize. But I decided to continue with building a certain sustainable life and simultaneously helping other people and the military as much as I could, which is why uh, from educational standpoint I got admitted for full scholarship at the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv, a major which has a major school of law, um, and then find a new job which I embarked in only last month at the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine, the Division of Reimbursement of Damages Caused
Oh,
by Armed Aggression. All these opportunities will not be possible if I actually left the country, I think, at that point. But that is all about, I think, Ukrainian resiliency, that we find the
yes.
ways to be able to show our talents, to show how much we are capable of, even under the harshest and non-favorable conditions that
It's pretty
life.
amazing. I had no idea that you were involved with all that. So you tried to get out legally and it didn't succeed, and so you've made the best of it. And
Yeah.
and really well, which is amazing, Justin. I want to ask you specifically, before we go much further, about working with our friend Ben, because that's how I know you, from a mutual friend who has an NGO who's come to Ukraine, and you guys have done outreach to some families. I was able to meet one of the families. Do you want to talk a little bit about having met Ben and some of what you've been able to do with him?
Yep, sure. So the way that we met was again completely random, I would say, as many things that happened to me during the past 3 years. Um, so I also met Ben through a mutual acquaintance. It was a student, a law student, from the Kharkiv National Law University at the time. And he was also like kind of involved in some form of assistance, mainly financial, during the first 2 months after the full-scale invasion. And then he was able, this my acquaintance was able to leave the country to study in London, and he kind of passed the torch uh, um,
Oh, nice.
to me, and I was able to meet Ben, discuss all the urgent requests that I received as a member of European Youth Parliament, Ukraine, the Ukrainian Students for Freedom, and other NGOs that I was part since 2021, and gathered all these requests from random people who simply needed some form of assistance due to the lack of it from the government or other organizations. And so it all started with Ben's American NGO, Refugee Direct Aid. He had conducted several missions um, I think he had a whole different project for Kosovo during the time of reconstruction and rebuilding
Right,
the
in the
Kosovo.
Balkans, former
Yeah,
Yugoslavia. Yes.
yeah, yeah. From as a result of the war there, and he simply deemed it necessary to conduct a similar project here in Ukraine. And during the first year, I think I was sort of a communications coordinator and also main volunteer on his behalf in Ukraine in general, and to provide like general numbers, for example, because I concluded a summary report recently on all the activities that we've been able to achieve together during this two and a half years, it seems to. And it was, I think, uh, over $150,000, and
Wow.
assisted over uh, I think 100 people, that's for sure, both military and civilians. And the military also were divided in our concept into wounded soldiers, and that is the category, for example, to which Andre, um, and then his family, Nadia and Pablo, uh, which you wrote an article about.
The family that we met,
Yeah,
that I
yeah,
met
yeah.
online.
Those related to this category, and then there were active soldiers, and we tried to provide mostly tactical, so non-weaponry equipment, because at the time it was prohibited, and then it was simply inappropriate and unreasonable because fortunately the government of Ukraine was able to gather up resources to provide strictly weapon-related assistance by
So
themselves.
this would be like vehicles and
Vehicles,
clothing,
tactical equipment, yeah,
protective
armor vests,
armor.
all kind of clothes, and all this stuff.
Yeah. So that, speaking of the family that you mentioned, that one young man, Pavlo, was engaged in an early resistance against a Russian tank. Do you want to relate that story briefly?
Uh, yeah, so the family that we're talking about is natively from Kherson region. Currently, unfortunately, that area is occupied, so
Occupied
that's,
by the
I
Russians.
think,
Okay.
on the left bank of Kherson. And uh, during the first days of the invasion, they were together, but they split up due to certain family reasons at the time. But the main thing is that Andrei and Nadia first left that area during the active phase of hostilities there. And after certain scrutiny at the crossing points and the hassles between Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, they were able to get to, I think, Mykolaiv, which was Ukraine controlled and still is. Andrei joined the forces, while Pavlo, his Nadia's son, remained in the occupied area for quite a long time. And during a certain period, Pavlo said, okay, I think I have to do something about what is going on in the area. And one of the things he did was, for example, very common currently in the Crimea, in the certain areas of the Donbass region, is to paint um, walls or some kind of objects in some Ukrainian symbols. Either could be flags, it could be um, the Ukrainian trident or things like that. And the other thing is direct impact that he could provide for the military.
The
Uh,
good old Molotov cocktail.
yeah, he noticed an armored vehicle. We think it was an artillery vehicle, if I'm not mistaken. Um, parked. It was winter time in the desertous part of their village, right in the middle of a certain uncovered with anything area. And Russians just left it there without any surveillance or soldiers guarding it. And what Pablo did was simply take a look at first what's going on there, whether it's really being surveilled or he had full access to it, and then he also looked inside. It was all first time experience for him, but nevertheless, when he thought about it, he found all he could from the raw materials. He had the kerosene, all the other ingredients of a Molotov cocktail you could you could find, and then proceeded to executing his plan of simply burning this vehicle
He
down.
blew it up to kingdom come, and
Yeah,
nobody was even killed.
nobody was
It's a
even
nice,
killed.
nice, clean sabotage
Yeah,
work of sabotage.
yeah, yeah. So that's the kind of thing that also was very common, at least during the first phases of this full-scale invasion. The communal defense, the territorial defense, uh, the amateur work of the Ukrainian civilians,
Yes.
which
And
provided a
please,
lot of ground for our soldiers.
please send my best to the family, and I hope to see them when I come there in November. They're really
Sure.
cool people. Unfortunately, they don't speak English, and my Ukrainian is non-existent, and my Russian sucks. So hopefully there'll be a translator. Hopefully you'll be there with us. Um, I want to ask you about, since you mentioned now that you're a lawyer, so technically, are you already a lawyer? Because what my question was, what is your vision in becoming a lawyer? It sounds like you've already become one, so explain that for us, please.
Well, it kind of it's the term that is very subjective. So you could tell me whether I'm a lawyer or not. It's not really a matter of some
I
kind of
mean, do you have
title.
to, like here, you have to pass the bar?
It's to become an attorney,
Uh,
but the lawyer is a more general term which applies
okay,
to
okay,
all kind of legal professions that we have. And well, as I work currently, I'm a lead specialist in the Department of International Cooperation and Representation, the division of reimbursement of damages caused by the armed aggression. Um, and right now, I think you could tell that I'm a lawyer, and legally, from the standpoint of our Ukrainian legislation, I'm considered a specialist in law. Um, Even though I currently have only bachelor degree in law and studying and finishing my degree, I think I'll receive my master's diploma in February 2025.
okay.
So it's up to you to
It's not up
conclude
to
whether
me.
I'm a lawyer,
It's not up
I'm
to
a
me.
lawyer or not.
You're a lawyer.
Attaching this label.
You're doing some amazing legal work.
Yeah.
Are you helping to get money back or money for people who have been harmed or have had losses from the war? And can you give us one or two examples?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm a part of the Department of International Cooperation and Representation. So we are not dealing with the mechanisms of getting money for reimbursements on the national level, even though, of course, we are aware of the ways how to do it. For example, people can sue Russia, the Ministry of Justice of the Russian Federation, for compensating for damages in a civilian in a civil court. But this way is highly ineffective because, well, how do you
How do you collect? How do
get
you
get
collect from
out
those
and
nice
collect
people?
money and
Yeah.
execute decisions? So that is ineffective. Another way is the international arbitration, but it's very expensive, and it also takes roughly 3 to 5 years for one case, and it should involve millions of dollars in order for it to even have a chance of succeeding.
Oh,
And then
okay.
there is roughly effective national mechanism, which is called in Ukrainian "Є If you literally translate it, it would be there is recovery, literal translation, which roughly about the governmental way to compensate for damages for two Ukrainians who suffered either a badly damaged houses or whatever property they had um, uh, damaged directly by the Russian Federation, and they had to prove that, or completely damaged, and then the proof would also be required. And in both cases, the compensation would cannot exceed 500,000 hryvnias. So that's one major limit
Uh,
to this instrument. And what my department and my division directly deals with is the international ways of how to do it. So you probably heard about the Register of Damages, which was instituted through an international treaty concluded by the Council of Europe. But to this treaty, and any country in the world can accede, regardless of its affiliation with the Council of Europe. And what basically this treaty is about is the international compensation mechanism, which, as an example from historical standpoint, was instituted in the Israeli situation when there was a UN established international compensation mechanism, and which covered billions of dollars to those who were damaged by that conflict. And in that example, we currently build up international compensation mechanisms on the European level, which extends to the entire world.
Now,
Um,
I'm sorry, I have to
yeah,
interrupt you. When you said Israeli, are you talking about reparations from World War II from
no,
Germany?
it's a different thing. So we're talking about it could be related indeed, but if we talk, for example, about our situation, we could also use the confiscate the arrested Russian assets
Okay,
like
I was going to
in
ask you.
foreign countries for that purpose. So reparations would be a direct concession of certain funds or assets by Russia after they accept, so to speak, the victory of Ukraine. So it's a whole other process, and it could relate to any kind of damages done to Ukraine, which is currently being documented. The mechanism that I'm talking about is purely individual. So any Ukrainian citizen who was damaged by who had incurred a damage from the Russian Federation to her property can file how do they call it? File
A claim?
a claim for compensating a certain damage to the register of damages that I mentioned. That
Uh-huh.
is the first stage. The next stage will come alive roughly in 2025, which would be a compensation commission, which would then review all those claims currently being gathered. And the third and final stage would be the establishment of the compensation fund. And that is when we actually talk about the funds and the money from which all those approved compensations will be distributed.
It
And
sounds
that is,
like that could be in the hundreds of thousands.
you mean the number of claims?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So it's almost astronomical. And
Yeah.
that and ambitious plan. It sounds like a really good thing to be working on.
Yeah. But that also involves a lot of things like uh, to bring an example of the mechanisms that were in the past. There was, for example, Eritrea and Ethiopia Claims Commission,
Uh-huh.
and it was able to refund or compensate or reimburse $338 million from $20 billion that were actually asked from claimants. Um, and oh, sorry, I talked about Israeli. That was another compensation mechanism. Uh, I was talking about Iraqi Kuwait UN Compensation Commission, and that it was a little bit more successful than the previous one that I mentioned. So it reimbursed roughly $52 billion out of $352 billion that were claimed by those who were damaged by that war. So even though it took roughly from 2004 till 2021 for the conclusion of all the payments to
Yeah.
those who were damaged, it's still the best the best mechanism we have at this point of time, because we are absolutely sure that Russia will not, at least in its current form, and for a current way of organization will not concede to any voluntary reparations,
Right.
uh, any kind of stuff like that. So
So this is
uh,
a way around that.
yeah, yeah. So the confiscation of Russian assets, foreign Russian
Yeah.
assets, is one way.
Yeah.
There are many other ways that
I think
we also
that's a really important way.
yeah
I'm glad you brought that up because there's needs to be some accountability. I just wanted to touch on one other thing, and that was about it's really one of the most important things that I wanted to talk about, adjudicating war crimes.
yeah
So when we talk about adjudicating war crimes, I understand there's the ICC, there are international agencies and organizations, and there are the courts of Ukraine itself.
yeah.
Do you anticipate that there will be many Russians who have committed war crimes held responsible for their crimes? And how do you see that playing out?
Well, first of all, it's great that you started with the distinction between the national and international mechanisms of accountability, because uh, as a rule of international law itself, there is a principle of complementarity. So if the international mechanisms such as ICC or ICJ come into place only if the national legal system cannot deal with the issues brought up directly. So if in simple terms, if Ukraine cannot deal with prosecuting war crimes here in Ukraine, then the ICC comes into place. That is why the prosecutor, the office of the prosecutor of ICC, issued the arrest warrants for Putin, for the Belova, etc., for Gerasimov, because Ukraine cannot um, prosecute them because of their status.
And that
National
specifically, the
court
people that you just mentioned, that had to do with the kidnapping of children
kidnapping of
from
children, and
the
then
country,
Gerasimov
from
and then
Ukraine.
the other general were allegedly targeting civilian infrastructure.
Mhm.
And then there are other crimes that were indicted. But in any case, if we are talking about the national mechanism, as you may have heard, um, earlier this week, I think it was um Thursday, that Ukraine finally ratified the Rome Statute, and today this law was signed by the President Zelensky. Then we also have to have a separate implementation law, which would officially make us a party to the Rome Statute, which brings a lot of features. But if we're talking specifically about the investigation of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, um, ICC could do all this, could do the investigation even before the ratification. In fact, since 2014 and 2015, because Ukraine voluntarily, under one of the rules of the Rome Statute, Ukraine accepted the jurisdiction of ICC, and
Mhm.
all the crimes that were committed and then on the Ukrainian territory could be investigated. And what this ratification does is, well, for one thing, it now becomes the Rome Statute becomes a source of Ukrainian law directly. So courts can directly use Rome Statute while indicting, for example, Russians or even Ukrainians. So it's our prerogative to do both. Um, Unlike the ICC, which you may also have heard, that Ukraine is ratifying Rome Statute along with uh, um, a condition that during the first 7 years after the ratification, ICC will not be able to prosecute Ukrainian nationals. And that is also the distinction that national courts will still be able to do so, which is a good thing because even though it's kind of hard to acknowledge, but of course Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian commanders also are not saints, and they commit crimes as well, unfortunately, not on the scale that the Russians do, of course,
Mhm.
but those cases also do not have to be tolerated at all. And in terms of the effectiveness of even prosecuting, if of even trying to prosecute these cases, it's a tricky question because, well, as far as I know, there are plenty of decisions by Ukrainian courts indicting and accusing many Russian soldiers of committing certain war crimes in the territory of Ukraine. But then again, there's a question of actually executing those decisions, and that is where the help of our international partners comes in handy, because according to, for example, our criminal procedural code, we can communicate in the form of international cooperation mechanism. We can ask, so to speak, other nations to, in simple words, look for this person, and if he's found, this country, let's say Germany, who's very supportive in this regard to Ukraine, can arrest this person and then bring it to Ukraine, and then Ukraine will be able to sentence this person. So that is one way. There's also such a principle in law called universal jurisdiction, and certain countries, for example, again, France, Germany, and many others, the Netherlands, who can um, arrest any person who committed a grave violation of Geneva Conventions, and then prosecute it, and it's going to be up to him, up to this country to either um, uh, leave this person to for execution of the sentence in that country, or to bring it to Ukraine.
Of
So
course,
there are certain.
they would have to be in those countries.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, physically, and then
Yeah.
yeah,
And we've seen
yeah,
that happen. For example, some Syrian war criminals, accused war
yeah,
criminals that were tried in Germany are
exactly. And
sentenced.
there are many cases. So one of the internships that I had personally was at Clooney Foundation for Justice, which is an non-governmental international NGO, um, specifically tasked to, in the Ukrainian context, of course, because they have a lot of other projects, but in the Ukrainian context, we also dealt with documenting war crimes, and then assisting um, the government of Ukraine and certain law firms in the other European states of prosecuting those persons and finding patterns of finding those people, etc., to bring them to justice. And there were a lot of cases heard already um, on that matter. So there's certainly sense
Okay.
in doing all of that, and I'm pretty positive that not all, because obviously Russians will be able to uh,
Escape justice.
escape justice, but many will actually be subjected.
And we look forward to that happening.
Yeah.
The sooner the better. Um, this has been really great. I just wanted to know, what are your plans for 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Do you make those plans? Where do you hope to be? And what do you hope to be doing?
Well, 5, 10 years, it's certainly a lot under under the current conditions for me.
Yes, yes, it is.
So my plans are the as far the farthest I can go is probably half a year at this point, and that is to prove myself that I can indeed do something good in the legal sphere for bringing Russia to justice and also helping Ukrainian citizens to recover from that injustice done by Russian Federation, and to be able to find some sort of stability in this unstable environment that we live in, and hope for the best on the military front line. And if we are talking about like very long term, after the victory, I definitely aim to finish my studies in the Chicago County College of Law, because I finished my pre-LLM and gained 10 out of 24 credits required to receive an LLM degree
Right.
a year ago, and I currently have a reserved right to continue my studies physically in Chicago, to get an LLM in US international and transnational law. So that would be probably one of the first things that I'm gonna do after the victory, then return to Ukraine and apply that knowledge here, hopefully to rebuild and provide for traditional justice in Kharkiv, in my hometown. Um, and then we'll see what will come out of that next.
Well, those are noble goals, and I wish you the best of luck. And you'll probably like Chicago, and I know they appreciate basketball there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that would be a side benefit. But you've given us a lot of food for thought. So thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us today. And please find us on YouTube, Global Chat with Roberto, or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great day. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very much.
much.